start off by saying I'd like to have this be very interactive. Don't wait to the end for questions. That really kind of destroys the moment. And frankly, most of the time when I give this presentation, there are a lot of questions. We have a relatively small group here today, so we can be as interactive as we want to be. Okay? I'll introduce myself. My name is Sean Jacobs. I work for a solid surface manufacturer out of Ohio called Tower Industries. The topic for today is called solid surface showers. We're going to walk you through that. Before we begin, I want to make sure we capture who's here in attendance. So I'll pass this around. You get your due credit. I always appreciate feedback, so I did give everybody an evaluation form. Please take the time at the end if you get a chance to let me know how I'm doing. With that, we'll get started. I fell asleep on me 1 second. There we go. So this is an AIA accredited course. You will get 1 credit for attending this presentation. I'm going to kind of run off the screen here a little bit, but that's okay. I know it pretty well. So, just a quick overview on the course description. This course will teach you not only the general characteristics of solid surface, but also the benefits of using solid surface in a shower application. You also learn the various means and methods of manufacturing a solid surface shower base, as well as solid surface shower wall panels and shower accessories. The learning objectives for today's course is to understand the physical characteristics of solid surface, and we'll delve into some of these points not even on the presentation where it's warranted. Identify the major components of a solid surface shower installation. Recognize the differing methods of manufacturing and or fabricating solid surface shower bases. We'll explore the difference there. Understand the best practices for installing solid surface shower components. Pretty basic, but I always like to start with the basic fundamentals of any topic. You want to start at the bottom and work your way up. Solid surface, what is it? Many of you have been in the industry a while. You've probably been around solid surface. You've probably been instructed and trained on various brands of solid surface, and you're probably somewhat familiar with the features and benefits of solid surface. But invariably, you're always going to come across a designer or a client or a customer. They don't have your background. They don't have my background. They're still going to look at it and be like, well, what is this? And a lot of times until you're asked that question, you really haven't developed a response yet. So this is the textbook response. The first bullet point here, a homogeneous blend of polyacrylic or acrylic resins and natural mineral fillers. Now, there's a mouthful. Now you try to restate that back to your client, their eyes roll back. They don't understand what you're trying to say. So I really try to break it down into some more layman terms. And essentially, if you think about solid surface and the roots of what it is and where it came from, it kind of helps to explain what it is. And my story, whenever it comes to that topic, is if you take a look at the countertop industry, that's kind of where solid surface started, right? Take a look at the countertop industry. You go back to the 1960s. Back in the 1960s, laminate dominated 75% of the residential market share for household countertops. So we all kind of grew up in that laminate world. I would venture, I guess most of us had a laminate countertop growing up as children or at some point in our lives. So when solid surface was introduced into the market in 1971, you can imagine at that very root beginning, how is it different? And they came up with the term that stuck, it's solid surface, i.e. it's solid all the way through. So if you think back to prior to that, laminate, as we know, it's just a decorative paper protected by melamine on top of some phenolic paper. But it's got a protective layer on top, being the melamine. Also predominant in those eras coming into the marketplace was cultured marble, so vanity tops. Cultured marble also has a protective layer of gel coat. So it kind of goes back to that root of what do I know at the moment? A lot of my surfaces have protective coatings. Now this one does not. And as it goes on to state, solid from front to back, top to bottom. Well, the easiest way to illustrate that is to look at a sample. So I did put up some samples for you to take a look at. You're not familiar with what it looks like. But it obviously captures the essence of the name. What is it? Well, it's solid all the way through.
So I understand how it's different from how is it different from cultured marble?
Well, cultured marble has a protective coating called gel coat. So it's a protective skin, if you will. And then there's a mix of variable colors and aesthetics within or behind that protective gel coat. It's kind of like window shopping at the mall. You've got the glass and you've got what you like to see behind the glass. That would be cultured marble.
But it was solid after you got past that protective finish.
Well, solid to a point. You think about, everything has structure and solidity, but on that particular topic, cultured marble, it's really a clear glass, a coating that protects the color that you're looking at underneath. Frankly, if you look at cultured marble and some of the varying differences between solid surface and all these other types of products that we're talking about, once you breach that protective coating, they do deteriorate quite quickly. So laminate, again, pretty hard, decent surface, but if you scratch through that, and we've all seen at checkout counters where the paper underneath can start to erode away and deteriorate, and what you're left to see, you see the brown craft paper behind the decorative paper. Likewise, a gel-coated type product too, if the gel coat is breached, the substrate or the matrix, the mix underneath can deteriorate. So again, that kind of taps into the benefits of solid surface, kind of solid surface 101, because it is solid all the way through, it does give you more performance, more durability, it's going to last a lot longer. So the color and pattern do also go all the way through, which again is evidence in the samples. No surface coatings do damage or disrupt. Kind of goes right to the heart of the question that was asked, so great time for that question, thank you very much. And again, as we move forward, holler out, shout out any questions that you may have. So solid surface, because it has no coating and because of the resins that are used to create the product, it is completely non-porous. So along with that, in today's marketplace, the trends are, we're seeing a heavy trend in healthcare, we're seeing a heavy trend in where large quantities of people congregate, like student housing or elderly nursing homes, things of that nature. Because they want something that is easy to clean, resistant to household chemicals, and hygienic. And that's essentially what this is saying here. Let me walk through it. So the fact that it's completely non-porous attributes itself to the ability to withstand staining. And I even kind of hesitate there because I don't like the word stain, because every time we use the word stain in our industry, the connotation is permanent. I stained my sweater, I stained the carpet, i.e. I can't take it out, it's stained. Really on solid surface, when we put reagents on the product, things like ketchup and mustard and red wine, and, oven cleaner, all the things that we might come in contact with in a household setting, and even most commercial settings, it's more of a surface blemish, because I can remove it. It's non-porous, so I just have to take the right approach to clean it. So it's not a stain per se, but we do tend to overuse that term. And that's because it is non-porous. Resistant to most household chemicals, the easy phrase there is it's virtually impossible to stain in a household setting. Now when we talk commercially, there are some laboratory environments, there could be some really harsh cleaning agents that could perhaps etch it, but the nice thing about solid surface, it's completely renewable. So even if I had something extremely harsh, let's say for example, pure bleach, and I accidentally spilled it on my solid surface shower base, and I walked away. End of the day, my shift's over, I'm going home, I come back in on Monday, oops, I forgot about that, okay? Something like a bleach would potentially etch it a little bit, but it can be completely renewed. The analogy I like to use with solid surface, and it's something that the industry has coined for a long time, it can look like stone, but works like wood. And we've said that for decades. But the general principle is this, like a piece of wood. If I had a nice piece of beautiful hickory or maple, and I accidentally left bleach on it, well, it's probably going to etch the finish on my wood as well. But like wood, we know we can refinish wood and make it look new again. The same principles are applicable to solid surface. I can make it look new again. Okay. Will not support the growth of mold, mildew, or harmful bacteria. All the manufacturers have test data to support that, and that's really attributed to the fact that it's non-porous. And there's no food for the microorganism or bacteria to thrive on. Okay, it's an inert material. Essentially, they starve if they're not cleaned off ahead of time. Now look at the next statement here. Will scratch and scuff under normal everyday use. Well, this is a presentation about the best thing going in showers today being solid surface. That's somewhat of a negative phrase, right? But it's there for a reason. It's relatively soft material. Fabricators love the fact that they can use standard carbide tooling to fabricate and make great things out of it. The fact that it was renewable, repairable that I just talked about is because it is a softer product. But it can scratch and it can scuff. Are you familiar with the Mohs hardness scale? generally speaking, so diamonds being really hard, that being a 10. Solid surface falls in at about 5.5. What that means is, if I take a steak knife, I can scratch it. Shucks, if I take keys out of my pocket, hold it on an edge, apply a little pressure, I can scratch it, okay? Now, remember the maple hickory analogy? If I scratch my beautiful hickory coffee table, I can sand it down and refinish it, right? Again, if I scratch solid surface, I can renew it. I can make it look new again. But it can scratch and scuff. The takeaway here for you is all solid surface on the planet scratches white. So you might be looking at a white piece of solid surface and a black piece of solid surface, a red and a blue. Which one's going to show scratching less? The white. Because they always scratch white. Okay, we're going to tap back into that a little bit later. Renewable, how is it renewed on the industry? Pretty simple, basically woodworking tools, variety of sanders and different paper. You don't always like to say sandpaper, but that's typically what you're going to think of. It's a type of sandpaper. There's a lot of different technologies on what that paper looks like today and what it's made out of, but essentially I'm sanding the product, buffing the product to renew it. So this kind of gets into the manufacturers and the colors that they come up with, and there's also a price association with this. So solid colors, let's talk for a moment about what it's actually made out of. The analogy that I was brought up with is the pancake analogy. And I'll allude to that again when we talk about the custom-made manufactured shower bases, essentially we're making pancakes. But the analogy is such as this. When I'm making pancakes at home for my kids, I've got a dry component, okay, probably my box of Bisquick or something. I've got my liquid component, might be eggs, milk, etc. I have to mix it up and pour it into my pan to make a pancake, right? What if I wanted to make my pancake blue? Add a little blue dye, right? Kind of cool. I want to make smart pancakes this weekend for my kids. Have some fun. Add a little blue food dye. Okay? When we add color to solid surface, it's pigment. Well, now if I want to add blueberries or chocolate chips to my pancakes, now I sprinkle those into the batter, try not to mix it up too hard, right? So we get it all smushed together. Make my pancake with some chocolate chips in it. The analogy is the same for solid surface. So if I start with just the basic mix, add a little bit of food dye or pigment, that's my solid color. So they're going to be the lowest cost, okay? Availability, usually similar from all manufacturers. Every manufacturer's got the solids pretty well covered, okay? You're going to see a lot towards the lighter color spectrum because of that scratching I talked about, but they also have some darker solid colors that they tend to prefer to use as accent colors for inlays, but you can get any color you want. In fact, if you're trying to match a commercial client of yours, if you get their Pantone color scheme from them, we can actually order the pigment in that same Pantone color. You can introduce any color you want into solid surface. You can have a lot of fun with different things like inlays and logos and stuff like that. Now, a step up from that, now I'm talking my chocolate chips or my blueberries. So colors that have what we call particulate, or sometimes they're called crunchies, or sometimes they're called the granite look. Whatever you want to call it, it adds a different element to my pancake, so it does add a little more in cost. So more expensive, easier to maintain than solid colors. What's interesting about that is, it's kind of a yes and no. If I go back to the early example, if I had a white color and a dark color, which one's easier to maintain? The white color, because it's going to hide minor scratches of everyday use. But if I go to that same lighter color palette, which as we know with every product here, a lighter color palette's easier to maintain. Now I introduce the particulate look, okay, my blueberries and my chocolate chips. The scratches are less detectable with the eye. So that's the takeaway here. So with minor scratches in heavy traffic area, a particular color will help hide those minor scratches. Again, availability varies by manufacturer. When you get to the particulates or the granite looks, that's where the manufacturers tend to differentiate themselves, and you'll see certain colors only available by one or two of them, not all of them. The other component here, and it's not touched on in this particular case, but in some of the samples in front of you would be then the veined product level. And that's going to be typically your most expensive, but also the most admired aesthetic, very unique aesthetic. So that's another category in solid surface. Okay, Okay, finishes. If you think about finishes, the matte finish, also sometimes referred to as the satin finish, is a standard on all products. It does help conceal minor scuffs and abrasions. That kind of goes back to general rule of thumb when you think about shiny products and dull products, okay? Some of my takeaways from my biography is, okay, if I have a brand new freshly waxed car, what's the first thing that frustrates me? Driving down the road on a dusty day. You know, if I'm in Iowa and the wind's blowing, I got dust all across the gravel road, my car looks like dude, right? Now, another analogy, if I stick to countertops or surfaces in general, if anybody here has a granite or a quartz countertop, typically the standard finish in that category is polished finish. When I used to sell quartz and granite to my customers, I would always recommend keep a towel near your sink because you're going to get splash up from the water. Now you get water spots. And when the water evaporates, now you got mineral deposits, hard water deposits, things of that nature. Just oils from your fingers and food will leave marks on a polished countertop. So, i.e., a little more maintenance because it's a polished surface. So the duller the finish, the more it helps conceal minor scuffs and abrasions. That holds true to any product. Laminate, if you go to a duller finish versus a polished finish. Granite, if you go to a home finish versus a polished finish, etc. Right down the line, the duller the finish, the easier it is to maintain. Gloss finish is not recommended because it makes the minor scuffs, scratches, and abrasions more noticeable, primarily for the reason I just explained. You can see more with a shiny surface, but even more so, what we just discussed, scratches become more evident. So it really highlights that scratch on a polished surface. And unfortunately, the problem with the polished surface and solid surface, remember I said earlier, it's about a 5.5 on the most hardness scale. The number one culprit against, quote unquote, I just destroyed my countertop, is the end user. Could be a homeowner, could be somebody in the cleaning staff of the building, takes something a little too aggressive, and they apply their thumb or their two fingers to scrub something away. If I have a polished surface, I guarantee they just dulled it there. And now they're scratching their head, they think they destroyed their new surface. How do they bring that back up to a uniform finish? So in the arms of our customers and clients, the gloss is really not recommended, especially in a high traffic area. It certainly could be an option in a low traffic area, or what I call a no traffic area. Things like windowsills or vertical applications, you know, behind maybe the front entry, lobby area, front of the house type of application. Absolutely, you could go for a nice glossy, shiny finish. It can be done because nobody's going to be really using it or touching it much. And why is it not available on textured surfaces? If you think for a moment about the wood analogy, if I have a texture, which all shower bases are going to have a built-in texture, for me to lift the sheen of my wood, the hickory and the maple analogy, I use a finer and finer grit of sandpaper to lift the luster, make it really smooth, apply my finish, lifts that luster. Well, I can't sand down the texture, because that would defeat the coefficient of friction that we're looking for in a shower. So I really don't want to sand it to create a glossy finish, because I would then be sanding away the benefit of the texture. Any questions on that? It's kind of like the fundamental physical characteristics, some of the features and benefits of solid surface that you can apply to any product. Okay?
Are you going to talk about how to maintain something and
Absolutely.
remove the scratches, remove the wear?
Let's talk about that just a little bit, because it probably doesn't delve into it enough here. So, general rule of thumb, if you think about how do I clean it, okay? I was taught this a long time ago. It's as easy as ABC, ammonia-based cleaner. That's the easiest way to do it. In today's healthcare systems, they have their cleaning protocols that are much more strict and stronger than we would use in our kitchen, and those protocols work just fine. I've put solid surface into healthcare environments for 15 years, and I've never once had a complaint my cleaner record doesn't happen. Okay? So, granted, every healthcare system has their own protocols, but whatever they choose to use works just fine. Now, if you're talking about a scratch, let's talk about a scratch, and we'll talk about a chip or something. Talk about a scratch, I would draw right back to that wood analogy. I have a scratch identified, I can sand it out, but the trick, I'll call it, or the tool of preference is a sander. If I actually take a palm sander and apply it on the product, the weight of the sander is sufficient. I just turn it on, hold it in place, it'll buff out that scratch. And then if I need to match it and have a uniform finish, I just have to match the finish that was provided when it was installed. Okay, so that might take a little trial and error, but essentially, play with my grades of paper and get it to blend out. If I take my fingers, there's more PSI, pounds per square inch on my fingertips right now than there was on that sander. And that's where some people can get into trouble. Well, Sean said I can just take some sandpaper and remove that scratch. You will, but if you're using your fingers, you're too aggressive. Okay? So the trade, the industry is well aware of that. They're going to go right to just a simple palm sander and buff it up. If it's a chip or a repair, there's typically two solutions. Most manufacturers will rely on their local fabricators to use glue. And there's a variety of tricks of the trade. Far too many to get into great detail right now, but you can actually, what's called a drill and fill. It's not like having a cavity in your tooth. Kind of drill up the problem area, fill it back in, allow it to get hard, sand it smooth. That's the easiest way to fix like a void or a chip of some sort. There are some manufacturers, of which I work for one, where we actually create a patch kit. It's actually made out of the same ingredients that the product was made out of. And it's mixed up in the field, poured into the void. The advantage to that is it's identical chemistries bonding together. The glue does work, don't get me wrong, but there is an advantage if you can use the actual raw materials. So those are probably the two most common situations. Great question though. And I actually love talking about that because I kind of come from that background. Trust me, I could be here for 2 hours talking about different repair techniques and different things you can do. So that's a great question, thank you. So now we're going to kind of segue into the actual showers, which is why I'm here today. So pretty basic, 3 components to every shower. We start on the floor, we have a shower base. We have to protect the walls, so we have shower wall panels and a variety of trim and accessories. A couple of key components when you're looking at the shower base, there are a variety of ways of making them. And that's what we want to kind of talk about a little bit, is what's the difference in how it can be made, and what's the difference in the offering. So we're going to talk about these different categories. A standard sized modular, I'll call it. This is an example of a standard sized modular. Custom sized fabricated we'll talk about, and then a custom sized manufactured. This is kind of an example of that, okay?
You're going to talk about the differences in
We will, yeah. So starting with a standard sized modular, the analogy here is I'm making waffles. If you think about, if I have my waffle maker in my kitchen, I pour my batter, usually there's a top component, it's basically a 2-part mold, close it up, right? Let it cook. My waffle now comes out of my waffle maker looking like the pan I put it in, correct? Same analogy. I'm taking liquid solid surface, pouring it into a mold, same type of 2-part mold, allow it to cook. When it's ready to come out, you can take it out, and now it creates that shape. So it's a one-piece molded design. If you think about your waffle, the waffle is one piece, right? You're not taking like 2 pieces and trying to use some butter and stick them together. It's one piece. Available, limited to standard sizes. Again, my waffle maker only comes in so many sizes. Okay, so my shower-based molds are available in so many sizes. And this last line, standard size drain orifice, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. That's just the hole for the drain. Standard to fit a prefabricated drain assembly. No big deal. So that's a standard size modular. It comes including a textured shower floor for slip resistance. So imagine now my waffle maker. If my waffle maker has a little texture to it, I can actually have a little texture in my waffle, right? Same analogy. The texture is built into the mold, so when I take my part out, I've got the built-in texture, offers fantastic coefficient of friction. The water dams may be integral or applied. This is actually what we call integral. Our industry loves that word integral. Integral sink, integral lab, integral water dam. Basically, it's part of the part. Okay, it's one piece. Therefore, it's integral. What applied means in this case is we actually kind of have a hybrid situation going on right here. It's impossible for you to see back there. The idea is this was all part of the mold, and the very top part of this water dam gets kind of narrow. So if you think about it, if I had 2 stud walls here, that's kind of the point of vulnerability, right? If I'm installing a shower base in the field, accidentally hit it against the wall, I could chip the top. So this right here has actually been reinforced by the manufacturer I work for, so it's stronger and thicker. So this is a full 1/2 inch thick versus it kind of tapers into like a 1/4 the way it comes out of the mold. So that would be an applied aspect to this integral design. This part was applied later in the plant. Integrated threshold, maybe raised or accessible, you can kind of see here. That would be your standard curb, as I call it, or raised threshold. Probably if you have a shower at home, you all have that. You step out of the shower, up and over that curb. That would be a raised threshold. For today's healthcare environments, a lot of times it has to be ADA compliant, so there would be an ADA compliant or accessible threshold, as it's called, in those applications. You can do a variety of sizes. The industry is pretty well versed on standard sizes. The architectural community does a pretty good job of drawing a lot of standard sizes, so the solid surface industry matches that in their molds that they acquire, so they can meet the needs of the design. Just some standards are listed here. I won't read through all of those, but you kind of get the idea. Now we're going to contrast that for a moment to custom-sized fabricated shower bases. So the difference here is I've got a manufactured base, okay? The main difference there is I've got liquid solid surface to play with, okay? My waffle analogy, okay? When I look at a fabricated shower base, think about, or think of the term fabricator. If you're not familiar with that term, let me explain real quickly. The general solid surface industry is comprised of manufacturers, and they make a standard widget, okay, a standard sheet. They send them to distributors. Distributors then sell them to fabricators, and they're the craftsmen that make everything you see in the real world, okay? They're making the beautiful countertops, they're making the beautiful whatever, okay? They're the fabricator, they're the craftsmen. So here, the fabricated shower base, I'm at that level. The fabricator does not have access to the liquid solid surface, but they do have access to the sheets, okay? So they can do a variety of really cool things with the sheets with a couple of limitations. So they're typically fabricated from 1/2-inch thick sheets of solid surface. 1/2 inch is the standard for all horizontal work. So every solid surface countertop that you see, it's really made of or made out of 1/2-inch thick sheets to begin with. Available any size because as a fabricator, as a craftsman, I can take these sheets and assemble them in a variety of ways and shapes and sizes to meet any need. Variable drain location, that just means custom drain location. So wherever this drain needs to be, it can be placed. Okay? So again, from a design perspective, well, the drain's way off in the corner, is that a problem? No, not if it's custom made. They can custom make anything. And again, the hole is standard size.
Okay, so, I'm sorry,
No, go
so
ahead.
they drill the hole in the sheet, right?
Yeah.
But how do you get
Taper?
the, yeah,
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
okay.
Good question. There it is. The next slide. You're ahead of me. So, custom-sized fabricators again. If you think about what this picture is starting to show, you can see there's a variety of elements. But before I show you that, let's take a look at this. A tapered floor created by heating the solid surface and thermoforming to the drain. Solid surface can be malleable when it's heated up about 2 to 220, depending on the brand. So essentially, I can put it into an oven and it becomes pliable. Okay? I can then set it into a shape that allows me to achieve taper to my drain location. So at that level, the fabricator would have some sort of a shape, call it a mold, and they would have already identified where the drain location will be for that project. They would create their shape, heat it up, allow it to kind of drape over this mold to create the slope to that drain location. Now because of that, there is typically a void beneath the shower floor, which has to be filled with, typically it's a structural foam or some other underlayment, like a honeycomb type of underlayment. And just a real quick example, if you think about, if I start with my flat sheet, and now I'm going to taper it to the drain, right? I just created a void underneath. Because I'll have the 1/2-inch thick material to begin with. So I'm raising it up on the ends, taper it to the drain, fill in the void underneath. Okay? Again, a craftsman, they can be very well versed and schooled into how to do that properly. There are some shortcomings, which we'll talk about in just a moment. The shower floor is typically a matte finish. Here's one of the shortcomings. Because they start with, I'll call it smooth sheets, and now they're building this shape, thermoforming it so it slopes to the drain, there's no built-in texture. Okay? Now, what's a way for a fabricator to get some texture? Well, one is if I start with a low grit finish, i.e. a matte finish, it's a little rougher. It's kind of like that coffee table analogy. If I've got 80 grit sandpaper, it's going to feel more rough than if I go to 1200 grit sandpaper. Okay? So you keep it pretty low, pretty dull, you give it some more traction. And if the sizes are greater than 30 inches in any one dimension, they are forced to seam the two sheets together. Now this is kind of important for a variety of things, and I don't know all your background entirely, so I'll just assume that you don't know everything. 30 inches. Anybody want to guess why is a manufacturer creating sheets that goes to the distributor, then goes to the fabricator? Why do they like that 30-inch width of their sheet? Anybody? Countertop depth. You walk into your kitchen tonight, you stand in front of it, guarantee if it's a standard kitchen, typical all-American kitchen, you measure from the front to the back, it's going to be between 25 and a quarter, 25 and a half inches deep. Okay. Solid surface industry was based on the fact that it's a relatively expensive material. We don't want to have too much waste, which adds cost. We don't want to have a lot of scrap or cutoffs. So let's make our sheets 30 inches wide. Allows the fabricator a huge advantage. Here's how. If I take my all-American kitchen countertop, let's just say it's 25 and a half inches deep, okay? I make two cuts, two rips, lengthwise down that panel. I cut a 1-inch piece off the front side, I roll that down and glue it, that's my front edge. I get a 3-inch piece off the back side, I put that up on top of my backsplash. There's no scrap. All of it's used. Some sawdust on the floor, and you're done. So every manufacturer standardizes around a 30-inch wide sheet. Well, in a commercial setting, when was the last time you saw a 30-inch wide shower? They don't exist. You're tired. ADA compliance at minimum, 36 finish wall to finish wall. Most of the time, it's going to be 36 inches deep and either 4 feet wide or 5 feet wide. Pretty common. Okay. So a fabricator to meet that need has to glue some sheets together. Okay. The negative with that is it's not as strong as the waffle or the pancake, but it can be achieved. And they do some phenomenal things. Again, they're craftsmen. They can do all kinds of things. So, kind of hard to see in these photos here, but if you get a chance here, you can kind of see where they have the curve at the floor, the curve up the top here. You think about that just for a moment. These guys are craftsmen in making countertops most of the time. What's that? That's just a cove backsplash in a shower-based application. So they have the methods and the means and the tools to do a lot of neat stuff, but it's just less durable because it's only 1/2 inch thick. It has to be reinforced on the bottom, and there is going to be a glue seam in most of these commercial applications. Now, water dams can be fabricated. Water dams can typically be fabricated in the shop. Again, the fabricator is going to make it and transport it to the job site for installation. Again, the threshold could be low or high. They're fabricators; they can do whatever you want. And it may be loose or attached. Sometimes there's an advantage in the field to have it be loose. If it's a situation where I've got my typical 3-wall shower alcove, but then I've got one where it's got that 4th wall, that wing wall coming out, sometimes it makes sense to have that threshold loose, and they can cut it to size in the field and fit it right in there nice and snug. You can also see here the additional height between what I call a 2-step water dam. This gives you more of an overlap joint behind your finished product on the wall. That could be tile, it could be solid surface, I would hope. But the idea is when the panel or finished product comes down, it sits on this inner ledge, and you have this overlap of protection behind it. Because that's your biggest vulnerability point for moisture to get into the cavity of the wall. You want that sealed. So again, that can be any height it wants to be based on the design data.
And you typically take the shower wall panels over the front of that?
Good question. In some designs, the panel will come all the way down to the floor. In my bias, preferred design, the panel comes up to the first step here, which gives you a nice level landing zone for your wall panel. If I take it all the way down to the floor, and this is coming up in a slide, we'll address it here real quick. Because of the slope to the drain, there's what we call smiles around the perimeter of the shower base. So when the panel goes in down to the floor, either A, we're going to have a little gap in the middle of that panel, on the floor area, that has to be caught. Or I have to scribe the bottom of the panel, which just takes a little more time in the field. It can be done, it can look great, it just takes a little more time in the field, which adds cost.
And what do you refer to that top part versus the threshold?
Well, I just call it a 2-step water dam. So I've got my lower step to receive the finished wall product, and then I've got my second higher step to seal that joint. So this part here, you can see here, it's like even a different color, right? Because it doesn't matter what color it is, it's completely buried behind your finished wall product, but it seals that joint right here where the finished wall product comes down and is seated on that inner lower step. Good question. Okay, now we're going to kind of shift gears again to a custom manufactured shower base. A shower floor is a single piece with no seams or joints. Remember the waffle analogy? This is the waffle. Now I'm making a pancake. So if I'm at home, I'm making my chocolate chip cookies for my kids, and I want to make a lot of small pancakes or a lot of big pancakes. I can start with a small pan, or in my bed, or make a bunch of small pancakes, or I can go to a big pan, right? Big pancakes. Same analogy. I can pour whatever size and shape is needed to meet the design need in the field, but it's solid thickness all the way through. And this is just a small little area. At the minimum at the drain here, I'm at about 5/8. So what is that? Maybe a foot? At a foot, I'm already climbing up to, let's just call it a nominal 1 inch. Strength and durability of this pancake like nothing else. The load test on these are 2,500 pounds or greater. So it's a phenomenal application when you want strength and durability in a commercial setting. And we're seeing a lot of uptick in the bariatric units because they need that strength built into the floor. But again, it's available in any size. I'm making a pancake. I can put that drain wherever you want. And again, the hole for the drain is the standard size. Now in that case, I'm making a pancake. Oh, I'm ahead of myself. I'm making a pancake. My pan has a texture to it, so I transfer that texture to the shape itself. Best coefficient of friction in the industry. Okay? Why is that important? Because slips and falls aren't covered under Medicare and Medicaid. So the hospitals don't want anybody to slip and fall in their showers. Shower floor is a single monolithic part, no voids within or underneath. This has seen a lot of miles, but you can see here real quickly, flat underneath. No reason for a structural foam, no reason for a honeycomb structure, completely solid. Okay. Extremely strong. Now the water dams can be installed in the plant prior to shipment, and that's what we'll talk about here next. If you think about the water dam itself, remember the earlier photograph, the two-step water dam? Same thing can be applied here, but notice it looks a little different because I'm starting with the pancake and then I'm actually applying the water dams in the plant. Okay, so that's kind of, here, I'll put it over here. It wouldn't be 1/4 inch, but you kind of get the idea. So that's getting applied to the pancake to create the water dam around the perimeter. Okay, so that is a secondary operation. But here again, as in architectural community, you have the ability to dictate what you want that to look like. Could be 4 inches, could be 5 inches, could be 6 inches, so there's an advantage there. You're not locked into that mold shape, the waffle shape. When I'm making pancakes, I can make the size whatever you choose. Again, that threshold could be integral or detached. Any questions on that? Yes?
What's the static load limit then of the 1/2 inch fabricated base?
The load?
Yeah, the load.
That's a great question.
If that's 2,500, you said, right?
The data exists. I don't know it off the top of my head. There's a deflection rating that I think if you apply 200 pounds, it can't deflect more than like 1/8 of an inch or something like that. But in a shower base, you're actually putting it onto a firm substrate. So that's not really applicable. So you're almost looking at like a load test compression strength. Every manufacturer has that in a PSI, I think, rating. So it is available. Again, if you just compare, it's an apple to orange comparison. The solid surface is the benefit, but when you compare 1/2 inch to 1 1/4 inch thickness, that's where they really vary. And I'm not here to speak poorly of anything, but I've seen, I've witnessed failures in 1/2 inch. So given a lot of load needed, certainly bariatric, no brainer.
Right.
But even just everyday hotels or standard patient rooms, things of that nature, stronger, better, kind of the analogy. Thicker, stronger, better. Just a real quick summary. We're looking pretty good on time. I'll be brief here on this, but so the standard size modular, again, custom sizes, technically no because I'm making a waffle. I'm limited to the size of my waffle pan. Custom size down here, obviously a custom size. so that's pretty easy. Custom drain location, yes, on anything custom made, if I'm making the waffle, the mold does dictate where that drain goes. Textured floor, yes, on the custom size fabricated. Remember I said earlier about the fabricated shower base, and they're gonna keep it a pretty low grit, like an 80 grit, to give it some texture or slip resistance. They do have another tool in their arsenal. They can actually bead blast or sand blast the surface to give it more of a texture, which I would always recommend if I'm you. The only bad thing about that is now they are deteriorating that thickness a little bit more, right? They only had a half inch to begin with, and now they're going to blast it with sandblasting. So they are wearing way up.
They were heating it up in order to get the slope that they needed for the drainage. They couldn't like press in something like.
Good question.
Heat or something that would give it.
Great question. I like what you think. So the question is, they're thermoforming it anyway, right? To create the taper or the slope to the drain. Why couldn't they affect a texture at that point? It doesn't get that liquefied when it's thermoformed, and it's not compressed to affect, like embossing it. There's no way to do that. Great question. On the logical level, that's perfect. But it doesn't work that way. Yeah, unfortunately. Great idea. Again, one piece. If I'm making the waffle, of course it's one piece. Why is the custom, why are the pancakes not one piece? Because I'm still applying the water dams and a variety of threshold options are applied after the fact. So technically not one piece, but the floor is one piece. Which is illustrated here, one piece shower floor. The maybe on the fabricated unit would be if you had a 30-inch by 36-inch shower base, yeah, I could get out in one sheet. It's only 30 inches in that one direction. Unfortunately, that's rarely the case in the commercial building. Okay, component number 2, and then component number 3 we're not going to spend a lot of time on, so we're looking good for time. The shower walls. You have to have something to protect the walls. Now I would argue that this type of a shower, please don't design anymore. I don't know any customers that like that anymore. Those are all those nightmares from junior high. But the idea here is solid surface can't completely line the perimeter of the room. Solid surface can be, what I like to say, fused together. There's a very sophisticated glue that's used, and I can sand it out. It's not unlike the wood analogy. If I take wood glue and glue together my beautiful piece of hickory and sand it out, okay, it can look quite nice. With solid surface, that glue seam is considered inconspicuous, so you don't really see the seam. So it does look like one large panel draped around the perimeter of the room. So it has some advantages. Today's showers typically are going to have privacy partitions and some other aspects to the room. So again, a solid surface shower wall, one-piece design eliminates grout lines. So here's the biggest takeaway. We all love tile. It's been in our industry, our shower industry for decades. Beautiful things you can do with tile. Let's just acknowledge that, set it aside. When I talk to facility managers, the number one problem with tile is the mold and mildew, and they can leak. It's just, sometimes the insulation isn't done perfectly. So when they're scratching their head and pulling their hair out, they like the fact that there are no grout lines, no mold or mildew availability. In fact, the solid surface is going to defeat that mold and mildew at the surface. Easy to clean and maintain because it's a smooth surface, okay, as opposed to a tile. Quieter than fiberglass. Now that's kind of interesting. And when I first read this, I thought to myself, well, if I've never been in a fiberglass shower, do I really understand what that means? No problem. Thanks for coming. Yeah. Ironically, I was at a hotel last night. I'm standing in a fiberglass shower unit, and I'm kind of, moving around, squeaking, and it's flexing a little bit. But the easiest thing to do is just walk up and tap on the wall. A fiberglass unit is hollow behind it because of how it's formed. So there's space between the outside of the shower unit and the wall behind it. So with that, you have vulnerability. Impact can certainly breach it. You've got the sound echoing because of that void. This particular product is adhered directly to the substrate with silicone. Now, if you think about that, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but the solid surface shower wall panels are all going to start at a 1/4 inch thickness, and that's primarily to save some cost and to make them less weight. You could go to 1/2 inch thickness. In fact, I would recommend a 1/2 inch thickness in like a jail setting or a prison type setting. But for everyday, most commercial applications, a 1/4 inch is sufficiently strong because it's adhered to that wall with silicone. And that substrate, typically, today's commercial environments, is 5/8 inch thick cement board. Very strong. The silicone acts as tiny shock absorbers, and then I've got a polymer protective coating panel over the top of that. It takes a tremendous force to breach that. So very strong, very durable. We already talked about the fact that it's renewable and repairable. That still holds true for the walls. So it will last a long time. Availability and sizes, there's a lot of different sizes out there. Standard, custom, depending on the manufacturer. Typically, you're going to find that a 5 foot, and that's nominal, I would argue about 61 to 62 inches is kind of the maximum width for a single manufactured wall panel for a couple of reasons. One is transporting it to the job site, installing it in the job site. It gets to be a little big. Now, it doesn't mean you couldn't go larger than that. It would just now mean that in the field, they'd have to be fused together, like that early photograph. Okay? I've installed solid surface panels in operating rooms. So the entire room is clad. You just fuse them together, you glue them together as you work your way around the room. And that's what it's saying. Most people are not going to do what we typically refer to as batten strips. I haven't installed a batten strip in 10 years. It's just nobody likes them. They're in the way of their cleaning, and it's, you know, the topography is different. There's a lot of people don't like them anymore. So you want a nice, smooth, easy to clean finish. Easy to clean with nothing more than a squeegee. How easy is that? You can't do that with tile. That's the other thing. Partitions, careful picture, but think toilet partitions. Now, if you think about the toilet partition analogy, I've got my privacy sidewalls, pilasters for support, door that I can lock, right? We're seeing that as a huge trend right now in showers, especially in student housing, where today's students, they want to certainly have their privacy, but now there's an added component of security. Even though it's just that latch, it's security. I can shut the door and lock it, okay? Or maybe there's a more fancy locking mechanism, but the opportunity is there to really provide what today's kids are asking for in solid surface. So if you think about, I'm doing my solid surface vanity top, I'm doing my solid surface shower, now I can also take the same color scheme out into that drying off area or that enclosure where they're entering into the shower. Now, in those areas that are kind of out there in the room a little bit more, they're going to be more susceptible to impact, people leaning on them, bumping into them and whatnot. So we do recommend at least a 3/4 inch thickness. 1 inch certainly is stronger, costs a little more, but you would not want to settle for a 1/2 inch thick wall panel or door. That gets a little weak. I've seen those fail, especially in a college setting or even in a hospital setting where people are falling into them. You want the strength of the added thickness. Suitable for freestanding applications, so the example there would be, if you think about the toilet partition analogy, today's market really appreciates a ceiling-mounted, ceiling-hung partition. So there's nothing holding the load to the floor. They're suspended from the floor. Makes it easier to mop the floor and clean the floor. Completely get that, but again, go to that added thickness for rigidity and strength. You can use them to divide communal showers, like that earlier photograph from the junior high nightmare. You don't see it anymore. They're all having dividers now coming off the wall. Some are having the doors, or at least a shower curtain. Component number 3, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because every manufacturer has a full complement of trim and accessories. But essentially what it's highlighting is trim to match any application. And the one thing I like to plant as far as a thought there is you can install a solid surface shower system over the top of pre-existing tile. Big benefit in a fast job site situation where you have a deadline, you need to get it done quickly, because you completely eliminate the upfront time and cost and the dust and the debris and the noise and the potential of maybe exposing some asbestos when you do the demolition. If the tile is relatively sound and intact, I can go over the top of it. But on the ends, in some areas, I might be able to see the tile behind it, right? That's where trim comes in. Trim is your best friend to enclose it so you don't see what's behind it. And another even more important takeaway with trim. When I think about my shower system, I've got the strongest shower base available. I've got a great coefficient of friction. I've got smooth walls, easy to clean. Does not promote the growth of mold, mildew, or bacteria. And I'm standing there, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is too good to be true. Is there any vulnerability to this type of system? There may be. And where it is, it's the inside corner. If I'm just putting up panels, and I've got a great craftsman scribing those inside corners, because I'm here to tell you they're never perfectly plumb or square. scribing the panels, doing a great job. Even the best craftsman in the world only has about an 1/8 inch overlap where those two panels come together. And it's silicone. Great. Good enough? Maybe. But if not, add 2 additional layers of protection by adding silicone and an inside corner trim. Now you've got 3 layers of protection, and the only point it can be vulnerable to moisture. Everything else is non-porous. Okay? So if you add inside corner trim, it'll eliminate the concern for any moisture getting into the cavity of the wall, and believe it or not, it speeds up installation. So it can actually lower the installed cost. Shower accessories, a lot of these are standard molds in the industry, you may have seen over the years. Every manufacturer has their own, soap and shampoo caddies, soap dishes, etc. Inside corners, outside corners, we talked about the band strips not being real popular anymore. I just talked about this, so I don't need to say it again, but essentially, shower trim, concealing the gaps where it might not have been scribed, simplify the installation, decorative detail, and to the eye of the beholder. Again, recessed soap dishes, surface mounted soap dishes, just something to be aware of. If you do a recessed soap dish, if that's a fire rated wall, might not be allowed. But all solid surface, especially in a shower application, is class 1A fire rated. Okay? But a lot of times at the job site, they don't want to breach that substrate of the cement board. Because to do this type of a recessed shower caddy, I'm cutting into the substrate. Shower seats are available, towel bars. You can design your own, because a mold can be made for any shape or size. We talked a little bit about insulation along the way, and I've got 2 minutes, so I just want to leave you with the one thing I haven't talked about yet. What we did talk about is the silicone behind the panels, tiny shock absorbers, gives it phenomenal impact resistance in a commercial environment where you need that increased durability. The shower base. Shower bases typically manufactured with a flat base. Okay? Now, you would think that the floor, whether it's new construction, would be level. They rarely are. So the takeaway here, and I know you're not installing these, but they need to be mounted level. Kind of goes without saying, but so that if you need to shim it, all manufacturers recommend a thin set mortar to fill in the voids and to allow the panel or the base to be seated into that mortar base. Okay? That also gives you no voids underneath, which lends itself back to that durability we talked about. Okay. So if you think about that for a moment, I might have 1 1/4 inch of solid polymer, and then I'm seating it into thin set mortar on top of a concrete floor. Are you kidding me? They won't break. Talked about that. Talked about the panels. Sometimes in a floor-to-ceiling panel, it helps to have ceiling or trim at the ceiling. This is kind of the last thing I wanted to share with you. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but how the panel would come down and overlap that water dam. I've got another floor over here. That's where the panel comes all the way down to the floor. So we talked about that earlier. Not as much of an advantage because now I have to smile at the floor. And this is the one that I always prefer to have that overlap joint behind it. It's very strong, gives me a level surface for that finished panel or tile. So even the tile installers love it. You get that nice level first course of tile and see right on that lower step. Any questions? Appreciate your time and your attention. If you have a moment, please fill out the evaluation. I always love feedback. Out of respect for your time, I've got exactly 1 o'clock, and I do respect your time, so thank you. Yeah, please. Oh, cost.